Over 2 years ago, IWC released the IWC Pilot Performance Chrono in titanium, and I made a video with the title When Men in Suits Design a Watch. Basically, I liked the watch, but I felt it was a watch designed to compete with the Daytonas and Speedmasters of this world. Now, 2 years later, I've been allowed to borrow it from IWC in gold because there's a little crow in my brain and I like shiny things, and handling a watch I can't afford is a little perk I gave myself. We're going to talk about this watch again because I still quite like it, but also because there's a conversation about market and position and customers that I think is fascinating. Let's dive in. The full gold version costs $29,300. It was released in connection with the Brad Pitt F1 movie, and apart from the gold, it's largely the same watch as the cheaper titanium version. There's no steel option for this watch. The watch comes in at 41 millimeters. The height is 14.7 millimeters. The lug width is 20 millimeters. For the gold version, there's no bracelet option. For the titanium, you get a version of the bracelet you'll also find on the IWC Ingenieur. The watch is water resistant to 100 meters. Inside is the 69385 movement. For a long time, IWC used to use the classic ETA 7750 movement, but transitioned to its own caliber, which offers 46 hours of power reserve. Once you unbox this watch, what you have in front of you is a substantial watch and a bit of a paradox. The case is as bare bones as you could get. They're not twisted lugs like a Speedy or have multiple facets like a Seiko Tentograph. It's round in the middle with straight downward curving lugs. It's an incredibly simple affair, which you'll recognize from the regular pilot's watches. The paradox lies in the fact that it's gold. So you get this ultra expensive luxury material and a case which at its core is tool-centric. There's no screw-down locks for the pushers. The crown is substantial and easy to wind as you would expect from an IWC pilot's watch. You get a decent amount of rotation for the hands for every turn of the crown. Moving from the case, you get the tachymeter scale. It's a ceramic black. It's got a high polish. It transitions to the dial, and I had to check the description of the dial because I thought for a second that it was a lacquered dial of some sort. I don't think it is, and I couldn't find anywhere stating that it was, but it's got a gloss to it that meshes really, really well with the gold. The dial itself retains the typical big pilot numerals, a huge old triangle at 12 o'clock, seemingly giant sword hands, and a day and date window at 3 o'clock. The subdials have a dual step, first a step up and then a step back down, which gives the dial a lot of dimensionality. Everything is excellently done. Legibility is impressive for a dial with this much information. The movement itself is behind a smoky glass that I think can be a little bit divisive. It works really well with the general theme of black and gold, but it does dull the viewing experience of the actual movement. As is almost tradition with IWC, they don't put in dinky little movements with a teeny tiny display window. This movement has a commanding presence. It's not the most awe-inspiring movement in the world to look at. Perlage and striping is there as I would expect, but there's no hand anglage or no black polished screws. For me, there's the column wheel, which you can geek out about when activating and deactivating the chronograph mechanism. This watch is top heavy because of the gold, but as usual, the straps IWC make are always excellent. They've got one of the best quick release mechanisms on the market, and IWC are just good at making something that feels really, really comfortable on the wrist. If you're one of the 50% of the viewers of this video who have not subscribed yet, then please click the subscribe button now. On this channel, I talk about watches, the watches I love. I rant a little bit, I go off on tangents, and I just want to share my hobby with as many people as possible. If you feel my content deserves it, then please click the subscribe button. Thanks a ton. Black on gold is just a great combo. It looks good on its own, but also often full gold watches with bracelet and all come across as quite flashy. It's kind of the point, of course, but I'm personally a big fan of Rolex gold models on Oyster Flex because it just pulls that little bit back, and it's the same here. It just restrains the watch ever so much. You get that punch, but then, you know, it doesn't go too far. Legibility is also excellent, and the dial has got this Lux tool combo that is really appealing. Dislikes? I'm going to say move over Omega. This is a thick boy at 14.7 millimeters in height. It's almost absurdly thick. The vertical subdial layout, I know it's not to everybody's taste, but I do like it myself. The movement itself is decent, but it's disappointing that they can't get it above 46 hours of power reserve, and it really annoys me that a brand that talks about their engineering skills can't or won't tell me what the accuracy and the anti-magnetic properties of this movement are. I don't want to have to go to Caliber Corner to figure it out. For the OCD people among you, you'll likely be frustrated by the way the subdials cut into the different numerals as well. It's a stylistic choice. So who's it for? 2 years ago, I said this watch was made by men in suits. My point was IWC have the Pilot Chrono, which is a popular model for them, but it's not a direct competitor to the Daytonas, Chronomaster Sports, and Speedmasters of this world. In my universe, there are 4 kinds of chronos. They are the tool chronos. Those are the pilot chronos like the regular IWC or the Zenith Pilot Chrono. They've got no tachymeter. They're designed with legibility in mind, and function trumps form. Then there are the classic racer chronos, Hanhart 417s, some generations of the Chopard Millimillias, watches that are for people with leather driving gloves and a Morris car somewhere in a garage that they tinker on. Group 3 are the sort of classic chronos. It's Patek, it's the Breitling Premier lines, chronographs that essentially lean on a bygone era and where usually the movement and the complication are the center of attention. And finally, you've got the sports chronos, Daytonas, Speedies, Chronomaster Sports. They've got ceramic tachymeter bezels, horizontal subdial placements. I would put my money on that sports chrono category being the most popular of all 4 categories. And to me, this Pilot Performance was a way of taking a tried and true IWC classic and offering a version of it that spoke more to the more mainstream buyer. So it's at least on the surface for the mainstream luxury sports chronograph buyer, a person that isn't necessarily married to any particular storytelling of flight or complications, but just wants a premium chronograph. For me though, it presents a problem. How many people are really going to choose this watch over an Omega Speedy, which costs less than the titanium version, or the Daytona, which is just, literally the most desired steel Rolex in the world? Not many people are going to do that. Because for me, this watch is a fabulous exemplification of what I've chosen to call the shadow problem that the industry has. The shadow problem is this. You've got a big, giant tree that casts a shade over all the other small plants and trees, which leads to them suffering and dying. Rolex is one of those big trees. No matter how good your Zenith Chronomaster Sport or JLC Polaris Chrono is, when customers walk into an AD, they look at the options and they say, nice watch, but I want the Rolex. And it's not just the brands. Some models just dominate the conversation. The Submariner, the Royal Oak. Some watch models just live rent-free in more people's heads. And convincing somebody to choose something different is really hard. The problem for a lot of brands is if you want access to a lot of customers, you can do 2 things. You can move closer to that big tree that casts the big shadow, or you can move further away from the tree. There's no shadow, but there's also fewer customers, or in this analogy, there's less water. Omega, with every new iteration of the Speedmaster, especially the most recent one, have moved closer and closer to the Daytona tree. Zenith, they've tried to do both. The Chronomaster Sport is as that's just a Daytona as a watch can be, while they also launch revival models that are so far from the tree that you have to question, how many customers are there even for that lineup? I'm not convinced that bar a brief hype phase around the F1 movie that this watch moves in any meaningful numbers. Not in gold and not in titanium either. I could be wrong, and I suppose it could be a deliberate choice by IWC to have it as a more niche peripheral line for a small subset of buyers. But that would just be counter to the way I think IWC thinks about their lineups. I have a hard time believing that this watch at its current price point competes against those dominant offerings from other brands, which I think is a shame. Because after having handled it again and again and again, I think it's an excellent option. This marriage of tool and sports aesthetics is one that works really well. IWC have done some excellent work in terms of dial production. They're just really sharp on that kind of thing, and they balance all the components into a really cohesive product. I'm even willing to forgive them of the thickness problem because I can justify it in my mind as it's part of the tool heritage. The fact is, I want a watch like this to be much more popular than I think it is. Yes, it's in that Daytona mold and Speedmaster mold, but it has enough character of its own to be worthy of a look. The world is just going to be too dull if everybody just keeps flocking to the Speedy and the Daytona, present company included. Those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.